Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Sarah Sumbrum. I'm Artistic Director at Dance Cleveland. And today I am joined by a very special guest. I have Gina Gibney here, who is Artistic Director, CEO, and Director of all things Gibney. We are so excited to have you on the call today, and of course, looking forward to your performance of Gibney Company coming up very soon, October 8th. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. It's just wonderful for me to be here. And it's just wonderful for me to contemplate a return to Ohio.
Yes, exactly. It is a return because it's been many, many years since Dance Cleveland presented the company. But I think the bigger return is, of course, the return to your roots. So tell me a little bit about that. Where did you grow up in Ohio?
Oh, wow. I grew up in a tiny township. It's actually a city now, Ontario, Ohio, which is really close to, it's part of Mansfield, Ohio. And I lived in Ontario from the time I was born, basically until the time I left to go to Case Western Reserve to college. And so I had a very kind of idyllic upbringing in this little township, which was at that time a lot of farmland and just a lot of space to dream and grow. I had a wonderful public school education at Ontario High School. Just a regular kind of small town Ohio upbringing. I was really fortunate from the time I was 4 on to study ballet, tap, jazz, and I think we called it modern jazz with a really incredible teacher, Ethel Batten at Ethel Batten Dance Academy. So that's where it all started.
Wow. So from the farm, the farm world, then you moved on to Case Western Reserve University, of course. You're an alum, and our dear friend and founder, one of our founders of Dance Cleveland, fellow previous board member as well, Catherine Karapides, was one of your professors. So tell us a little bit about Catherine. What was her influence on you there at Case? And I know you stay in connection to her even now.
We are very close friends, and to this day, I went to Case Western to do something in the area of social justice or social action. I really wanted to kind of change the world, and I wanted to create social change. And that was why I was headed to college. But I think around my sophomore year, I found myself in a modern dance class. I had never studied modern dance in that manner, but I knew something was missing from my kind of rigorous academic orientation. So I found myself in a modern dance class taught by the legendary Catherine Karapides. And it really changed my life, not just that class, but the subsequent experiences I had with Kathy, with her husband, David Brown, who was also a mentor, with Kelly Holt, who just recently passed, who was also a very close mentor. The three of them really shaped who I am and showed me a whole different way of living, a whole different way of expressing myself and kind of being in the world. So it was literally life-changing experience for me at Case Western.
That's amazing. And anyone that knows Catherine knows exactly what you're talking about. She's such an impactful person and special person. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Now, you said that you studied, social justice and some of those things. Of course, that has carried into the work that you do at Gibney. For those of you who don't know, it's not just a company. It's not just Gibney Company. It's a whole complex. It's a whole, world that you've really created in New York. So tell us a little bit about Gibney. What is the building like? What are the offerings? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, first to tie it directly to Kathy, honestly, and Mather Dance Center was one of the things that was so tremendous about that program and that human being was this really belief of the power of art to change people's lives. And that meant really respecting and valuing the rigor of art and the beauty and the value of art and the complexity, but also really a deep belief in making it inclusive, in giving people access to it. And that was a beautiful kind of tension that Kathy really embodied. Deep respect for the art form, but a deep belief that it should be accessible to people. And I really carried that belief throughout my career. It really shaped me. And I really when I first started to train professionally during my time at Case Western and then the subsequent years in my early years in New York, I really focused on becoming an artist, on developing my voice, on training, on, all kinds of different ways of developing my art form. And I wasn't so, I'd kind of put the other interests a bit on the side. But, I think living in New York, you're just surrounded by so many inequities, so many issues, so many problems, that it was just natural for me to start to intertwine social justice into my work early on. This is something that goes back to our founding in the early 90s. But really, I think the founding of this big organization that you alluded to was really very organic. I went to New York. After I lived in Cleveland, I went to Seattle for a few years, but I ended in New York very, very quickly, very early in my career. And I knew I wanted to make work and have a company, and I wanted to collaborate with wonderful dance artists and wonderful visual artists and composers. That was a huge draw for me to move to New York, motivation for me to move to New York. I know I wanted to have a space. I knew I wanted to be surrounded by a community of artists that were colleagues that I could both support and learn from and be challenged and inspired by. And I also knew pretty early on that I wanted to use art to affect some kind of social change, that living in New York, you just can't remain in a bubble. There's just too much.
Yeah,
and the value of it's a melting pot, and the value of the arts to impact lives is just too tangible. And so I worked in those sort of three areas. And eventually that sort of distilled into company, having a dance company, center, having a physical space, which started as one studio and today is 23 studios in two different locations. And then having this work in the community, which evolved into a pretty robust program that works with survivors of intimate partner violence, and also works in a really concerted way on violence prevention and awareness with youth. And so that evolved all very organically. And today the organization is structured around this sort of triumvirate of company, community, and center. But it was there from the beginning, and it was very dynamic and very exciting growth, but also kind of surprisingly organic.
That's amazing. Well, we encourage all of our subscribers, if you've never been to Gibney Complex in New York, that they should definitely check it out. So shifting gears a little bit, you said you created your own company, and of course your own choreography was first set on the company, but now there's been a shift as well. The company that we're going to see on October 8th is not actually going to be performing any work that is choreography by Gibney. There's actually going to be 3 different sets of choreographers that people will be able to experience. But tell me a little bit about that shift. What was the decision to go from Gibney Company before, that was primarily all of your choreography, to a new Gibney Company that is trying out works by other choreographers?
Sure. Well, the organization really took a shift in about 2010 to really focus on addressing a lot of the need for space and resources and opportunities for the larger dance community. I received some opportunities, or I was kind of faced with some opportunities that I really just could not pass up to expand our spaces. First at 890 Broadway, our original, single studio expanded into 9 studios and an entire floor. And then after that, we were invited by the city to take over a whole other complex downtown. So for a period of time, my attention was really shifted. It really shifted from being a choreographer to basically building the organization and seizing some of these opportunities, which were just too extraordinary to pass up. And also the dance world, again, was so in need of space and resources that it felt I was just in the right place at the right time and could
I think
capitalize.
that's something that people don't realize. Space in New York. You think of New York as, oh, it's so big, there's got to be plenty of space. But for those not familiar, finding space to create dance work is nearly impossible. So that's why the studios that you've created are so important and really impactful to the whole dance world, not to just Gibney dance, but to everyone.
That's such a
to the
great
industry
point.
as a whole. So thank you for doing
Yeah.
that for the industry.
Yeah, thank you for making that point because real estate in New York is a monster, and to be able to, and that's why these opportunities were so unique. They were both in situations where I had relationships that would allow me to take over certain leases and be entrusted by either the city or by my nonprofit landlord at 890 to make them into something that would be more of a creative center. But that took all of my attention, and for a little bit of time we did start to first, we started to remount some of the work that I had done. I did almost exclusively evening length works as a choreographer. So we started to sort of pull those apart. So a really wonderful period of time when I was working very closely with Amy Miller, who was co-directing the company with me. And we started to kind of excavate some of those works. But that was never really what I wanted to do. I always loved to be in the studio creating new work. I didn't like to revisit. And so that kind of ran its course. And then we thought, let's start to commission other choreographers. So we started to dabble a little bit in commissioning. But to be honest, by this time, the rest of the organization had grown so much that it was kind of starting to overshadow the dance company, even though everything about the organization grew from within the dance company.
Right.
It's the centers and the fact that we were now a presenter and we were doing residency programs. We had 23 studios where other companies were rehearsing. It started to sort of overshadow our company, which had always, in my tenure as a choreographer, in my tenure as a choreographer, had always been small. I liked doing smaller scale work, 6 dancers, 7 dancers, intimate, performed in spaces like the Joyce or St. Mark's Church or Brishnikov Art Center. I liked that scale. I liked to work for a long time on an evening length project. But we started to commission other choreographers. And then in 2020, we had this sort of lightning bolt opportunity when a very generous donor, Andrew Davis, basically looked into my eyes after I had tested 10 ideas on him. And he had said, nah, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. He said, Gina, what do you really want to do? Don't try to second guess me. What do you really want to do? I said, okay. And then this wasn't planned, but I just said I would go back to our founding as a dance company and I would recreate the company as a repertory company that can sort of meet the scale of the organization now and can fill this incredible, what I see as a void in New York for a large scale repertory company that does works by internationally renowned and rising choreographers and that has incredible, versatile contemporary dancers and isn't tied to a certain technique or a certain legacy, is just open and creative and imaginative. And he goes, let's do that.
Thank God you did, because I think you definitely, you hit the nail. It's the choreographers that you've selected. I'm sure that it's a very careful consideration every time you figure out which choreographers you're going to work with. But the lineup that we have for October 8th, for example, we've got Sonia Taya, we've got Oh Courage. And she's, of course, known for her work on So You Think You Can Dance, but she's also a Tony Award-winning choreographer. So I don't think you can go wrong there. Johan Inger, we have Bliss making its Midwest premiere with music to Keith Jarrett, of course, for that. And then Rena Butler, who was just recently, I think it was last year, she was a Dance Magazine kind of cover artist. So tell me a little bit about those pieces in particular, and how did you select those 3 choreographers as some of the repertoire that you are going to be touring this season?
Yeah. Well, let me start with Bliss. That's a good place to start. And I want to start with Bliss for a couple reasons. First, it was the first piece that we actually restaged, meaning the other works on the program are all things that we have commissioned. So they were created specifically for our company. And with that, you're kind of taking a big risk. You don't know completely what you're going to get. I'm happy with the results of both the other pieces that you mentioned. But with Bliss, we knew that that was a work that we wanted in our repertoire. But I think what I'm very excited about is I don't think people know that Keith Jarrett and Keith Jarrett's score, the Cologne Concert Part 1, is basically the underpinning of this beautiful piece, which we'll be presenting. He's a Midwestern native. He grew up in Pennsylvania, I think in Allentown, Pennsylvania,
More Midwest
and
time.
more Midwest ties. And he's just legendary. It's a legendary piece of music. It'll be familiar to many people, and for those it's not familiar to, like, get a recording. I think it's the most listened to jazz recording in history, and it's legendary. But what Johann has done is really create a piece that sails and soars on the music. It's buoyed by the music. It doesn't imitate. It's just a beautiful, dancey piece about joy and about bliss and about the kind of effervescence of life. And so it's a really beautiful marriage of movement and music.
It is. I think that's what I loved so much about it. It's just, like you said, the lightness and the joy behind the dancers as they perform the work. You can feel it come through the music and the movement. So
yeah, sometimes I think when you think of pieces that are more accessible or available, you think they're light. There's a lot of depth and texture to this piece too.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I appreciate that sort of that texture and that tension that it provides. The other piece on the program you mentioned was by our first ever choreographic associate, Rena Butler, who joined the company as a dancer. And we very quickly realized that Rena's career as a choreographer and maker was really taking off. And we carved out a special role for her in which she could continue to dance with the company, but also she created two beautiful works on the company. And the first one is the trio that you're presenting, Lucis Natura, which is a really wonderful piece about colonization, about decolonization, about, it kind of plays with the Kong myth and really talks about some of the issues around decolonization. And it's a really powerfully performed trio for three men. And since Rena her career has just taken off, as you said, she was on the cover of Dance Magazine. I think she's off in Norway now, creating an evening length piece on the company there. She did a piece on groundwork, right?
She did. She just created a piece for Groundworks not too long ago that was performed here.
Yeah. So just was really a privilege to be part of supporting Rena's just incredible launch as a maker. And then the other piece of the program, culminating piece on the program, is by the powerhouse Sonia Taya, who, as you noted, is commercial. She does Broadway, won the Tony for Moulin Rouge, and also is a concert dance choreographer. And she created what I believe really is a piece for our time. It was created during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So picture this, we get this transformational grant in early 2020, okay? And then 3 months later, we close our studios for COVID. And we're thinking, what do we do? We're supposed to be transforming.
Right.
Let's get to that. So we thought, no, we have to keep going. We have to just, the dancers weren't supposed to start until September. So we thought, okay, sign those contracts. We signed those 12 contracts. And the dancers some of them moved to New York from other cities. And I'm telling you, on that September, whatever that first day was post Labor Day, they put on their masks. They came into a building that was closed. All of our studios were closed. So they came up the freight elevator in a building that was closed, and they worked with Sonia Taya on a piece that is really about moving through adversity, overcoming, emerging, renewed and strong. It really is, without being literal, it is a piece about emerging from silence, emerging from limitations, and basically creating, just hope. It's a message about hope. It's a message of rebirth.
And how perfect, like you said, I mean, for the company at that time, and everything that was going on in the world, and to have that work set on the company right then in that moment, I think that's perfect. So we're really excited to see that one.
Thank you. Well, imagine the labor of going into a studio in a mask and trying to get back to dance, trying to get back to creating, even just being out, in public in New York City, riding your bike, staying off the subway, what went into the creation of that piece is nothing short of a miracle.
Oh, and the title is Oh Courage. I mean, I think you had to have courage at that time just to even, like you said, go together in a mask and say, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to work through this together and make it happen. So the dancers had to be courageous themselves just to make that happen.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
What would you hope that people take away from the performance at the end of the night as they're walking out? What is your biggest hope for the audience on October 8th?
I always hope with dance that people, first and foremost, in this post-pandemic world, well, maybe we can't say that quite yet, but in this moment,
I know, can we say that? I don't know. We're in a new iteration of it, but I don't think it's gone.
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, the appreciation for being in a space together, which is something I never want to lose sight of, that I never want to take for granted again. Oh, I'm at a live performance. I'm experiencing something that is happening right now in this moment with people who are living and breathing and surrounding me. And that's special. You can't do that on Zoom.
Nope. It can't be duplicated. That's for sure.
Can't. And I want people to really to feel that the groundedness and the kind of bliss of just being in space together, but also just the complexity of dance and movement and art, and that these pieces are all so different. But if you remain open to the experience and let it enter you and let it enter you on its own terms, but also on your terms, to just be open to the feelings and the sensations and the sounds and the impressions, that's all there is. And I think that it's important to realize that dance is this ephemeral art form, and it is completely incomplete without an audience. Without the audience, it's like the tree that fell,
right,
in the island or whatever. Did anybody hear it? Well, without an audience, dance is kind of hypothetical. So
as they always
I
say,
hope the audience.
It's just a rehearsal. I mean, dancers can dance among each other in a studio, but it's not a performance until the audience is there with them. So
yeah, exactly. And I really hope that they feel that they're completing our work in that way, and that they find something that they appreciate.
Wonderful. Well, for those of our audience members who want to talk with you a little bit more, hear a little bit more about the background of the company, they can actually come before the performance, sit in the theater as long as they have their ticket, and we'll be doing a pre-talk before the show with you and Amy, and we'll be able to continue this conversation and maybe even do a little movement ourselves. So we hope everyone will join us for the pre-chat before the show. And again, we just want to thank you, Gina, for sharing a little bit about your background and what we can expect at the performance. And we really look forward to it.
Thank you so much, Sarah. This was just a complete pleasure. I'm really so excited to be coming back to Ohio. Coming home.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.